What's up, preppers? Welcome back to another video. Something new we're trying here. This is a reaction video, and this is because I've been sent this The Wargame. It's episode 1 of The Wargame. It's Sky and a load of politicians, ex-politicians and ex-military people have put together a scenario-based war game for essentially World War III. And it's based around in the bunker, the meetings, the government talking, what they're going to do, what's happening and stuff like that. So we're going to join it just as it starts and we're going to react to it all the way through. So we'll see how this goes as a first time trying this kind of thing. Hopefully you like. If you want to listen to the whole podcast, please go to Sky News and find it on there. I will link it below. But here we go. Let's give this a try. Here we go. We're going to join it just as it starts. It's already give all the introductions, who's who and stuff like that. Obviously, go and watch the whole thing or listen to the whole thing if you want to hear all that bit.
In the real world, it's a Tuesday morning in early April. In the war game, it's almost 6 months in the future, and the government is in crisis mode. To set the scene, we've mocked up some rolling news reports from an imagined UK television station. Everyone stops talking and listens.
It's 8 a.m. on Monday, 29th of September. Our top story this morning. Travel chaos on the railways and the roads after a major power cut left parts of England and Wales without electricity. Multiple train stations have been forced to close to passengers this morning after what the National Grid is describing as an issue with 2 generators. Reports are also coming in of problems on the roads. Transport for London says some traffic lights in the capital are out of action and police officers may be called in to manage certain junctions. The disruption comes just 3 days after simultaneous fires broke out at ferry terminals in Plymouth and Portsmouth, halting Channel ferry crossings over the weekend.
This is already starting to sound very familiar with the random transformer fires that we've been getting recently.
The Home Office says counter-terrorism officers are now investigating the fires as a precautionary measure. The security sources say they haven't ruled out foul play. Last year, the heads of MI6 and the CIA accused Moscow of waging a reckless campaign of sabotage across Europe.
I mean, that's a fake news channel, but I mean, I don't think they would ever call out Moscow for that. They would never say it's them. I don't think they'd point the finger publicly like that. Interesting though, current times are in.
Russia has previously denied involvement in any sabotage attacks, and there could of course be a perfectly innocent explanation for this transport chaos. For now, the cause is unclear. Then, 2 days later, this happens.
It's 8 a.m. on Wednesday, the 1st of October. Our top story. Explosions have ripped through a major naval base in northern Russia, killing and wounding dozens of personnel. The Russian president has suggested the attack at Severomorsk was linked to the UK and has vowed revenge. The British government has yet to comment, but Downing Street sources have strongly rejected the allegation of any UK involvement.
So, spoilers, this episode is called False Flag, so we already know that it's not the UK, but it feels, as although it's scary and it could happen, I think the accusations are too straightforward. I think they'd beat around the bush a bit more than they are doing.
We'll bring you more as we get it.
As tensions grow between Moscow and London over the next few days, British police make a shocking discovery.
It's 4 p.m. on Sunday, the 5th of October. Our top story. The Ministry of Defence says 2 F-35 pilots have been found shot dead in Norfolk. The circumstances of the deaths are not clear and military police are investigating. Both pilots are part of 617 Squadron, which fly the UK's most sophisticated F-35 warplanes out of RAF Marham.
That's scary.
In other news, Moscow has recalled its ambassador to London, saying Britain is now considered an unfriendly state. The extraordinary move follows the deadly blasts at a major Russian naval base that the Kremlin has claimed were linked to the UK, but without providing evidence.
The mysterious killing of two such elite fighter pilots, coupled with the aggressive rhetoric from Moscow, prompts the Prime Minister to convene an emergency COBRA meeting. These are held at times of crisis. COBRA stands for Cabinet Office Briefing Rooms. The Wargame begins at 5 p.m. on Sunday, the 5th of October, 2025.
I called this after the deaths of the two F-35 pilots, coupled with the growing both intelligence and situation with Britain being put at the heart of the messaging from Russia. So thank you, colleagues, for attending on
I like how they've got somebody with the same accent as Keir Starmer.
Sunday afternoon. Could I ask the National Security Advisor, Mark Sedwell, to run us through the agenda?
Prime Minister, thanks. I suggest we start just by seeing whether there's anything further in terms of threat or other intelligence that we need to know before we come to the various options for action, both by you and colleagues. So,
Rob gives his first inject of information to the players.
I'll start with the situation update of where we are. There was indeed on the 1st of October a terrorist attack in northern Russia. It does appear that in the early hours of that day, over 100 Russian naval personnel were killed in detonations around the port of Murmansk, Severomorsk, and its residential area. GCHQ did a lot of work to try and identify who had been behind this particular attack. Rather curiously, there were some inferences that Dagestans are involved.
The intelligence is referring to Islamist extremists from the Russian Republic of Dagestan. It suggests their motivation for launching the attack could be anger at Moscow for recruiting their men to fight in Ukraine.
But historically, when something like that happens, they instantly want to take credit for it. So they would be straight, it wouldn't be an investigation, they'd have released a video saying, "We did this, look at us, we're amazing," like they always do.
The Russian government announced that they needed little further evidence to confirm that this was an attack by British intelligence using divers. I think we can dismiss this nonsense.
Rob then shares information from MI5 on the two F-35 pilots whose bodies were found early in the morning.
Freddie the Frogman did it.
Both appear to have died on Saturday night. Police investigations are ongoing. We have low confidence in the intelligence so far, but it's likely that these men were tracked before they were killed.
He highlights two other important developments.
Signals intelligence reveals that there is a snap Russian naval exercise underway today involving rehearsals for the deployment of surface-to-surface missiles in the North Atlantic. What they also note at Cheltenham is the intensity of cyber attacks on UK businesses and government websites has increased by a magnitude of 65%.
Cheltenham refers to the location of GCHQ, the government's signals and cyber intelligence agency.
Again, the cyber attacks increasing, we've seen in the last several weeks. So, I mean, that's two signs so far that kind of we've already seen in the real news. So I know there's extreme scenarios in between that, but the cyber attacks definitely have increased, and I think 65% probably is a conservative estimate.
While the cause of the rise in cyber attacks isn't clear, it could be yet another sign of hostile Russian activity. The National Security Advisor is interested in what appears to be an exceptionally large Russian naval exercise involving warships, aircraft and submarines. It's being tracked by American, Norwegian and British ships. When he says CDS, he means Chief of the Defence Staff. That's the Prime Minister's top military advisor and head of the UK Armed Forces.
PM, perhaps from CDS, just more on this Russian naval exercise and how we're monitoring it, and in particular, CDS, do you have any concerns about how they're operating in these circumstances?
Yes, thank you. So, Prime Minister, if I may, from the military perspective, I'd like to widen this discussion a little bit. I think it's becoming clear that the country is being subject to a wide range of coercion. We've seen the attacks on the railway, the likely attacks on the traffic infrastructure in London and the ferry fires, and now we have had 2 F-35 pilots murdered. And I have to say that if we fit all of those things together, the murder of the pilots is a traditional special forces activity. So we should not indulge ourselves by thinking that was some sort of accident.
Killing pilots was part of the Soviet playbook during the Cold War. Richard Barons, the general who's playing our defence chief, once told me about a Czech Special Forces officer whose task in the run-up to war, once he'd smuggled himself into the UK, would have been to go to the officers' mess at an RAF base in Lincolnshire on a Friday night during happy hour and shoot all the pilots. And when you think about it, a 9mm bullet is a much more efficient way of grounding an air force than a barrage of missiles.
So what I've done so far is I have made sure that all the pilots of our...
The base security on places like officer messes, that would be difficult to get a weapon through that. That would take a lot of planning. That wouldn't just be a random person doing that attack. They'd have to get through a lot of security to be put in that position.
F-35 and Typhoon aircraft are now coming into their bases, and they will stay there with their families until the situation is clearer.
This means they'll have additional security.
To answer the National Security Advisor's direct question, we are monitoring a Russian exercise in the North Atlantic. There are 2 dimensions to this. One is, as reported, the Russian nuclear bomber submarines are coming into the Atlantic. Now, they could threaten the UK from anywhere in the Atlantic. And the 2 other submarines that carry cruise missiles could threaten the UK with conventional attack from certainly the eastern half of the Atlantic. So my concern as CDS now is that we are managing a great deal of Russian coercion. We can't exclude that we're on the threshold of this becoming a military attack of the UK. This might all be precursor activity. And I need to get the armed forces ready for that without, of course, provoking Russia into the one activity we would wish them to avoid. So I'm going to ask that we begin to concentrate some of the military units in their bases, and I may even disperse them. I need to start outloading some supplies so that we're not caught short.
He's talking about ordering troops to their barracks, potentially getting them to spread out to other sites, and ensuring things like ammunition, fuel and other supplies are brought out of storage.
Somebody from the government needs to be listening to this, because we have a shortage of all supplies, and including especially service personnel. So how much we could actually put out there is another question altogether.
PM, if I may, I think we have to assume that essentially we're now being put to the test. There's a series of unconventional activities by the Russians. We mustn't jump to conclusions, and certainly mustn't say that publicly, but potentially arson attacks, possibly these 2 assassinations. I'm not a believer in coincidence. And now we have them essentially raising readiness in terms of the deployment of their naval forces.
Like many around the table, he's encountered Russian aggression before. Mark Sedwell was the real national security advisor when the UK accused Vladimir Putin's Russia of attempting to kill the former Russian double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia with a Novichok nerve agent in Salisbury in 2018. Moscow has always denied involvement. Mark led efforts, alongside Amber Rudd as the Home Secretary and Ben Wallace as Security Minister at the time, to rally NATO allies to retaliate to the attack. It had left the Skripals critically ill and killed a British woman, Dawn Sturgis. More than 20 nations agreed to a mass expulsion of alleged Russian spies from their respective countries.
I suspect what they're doing, as Putin always does, channeling the old Leninist doctrine, keep pushing, and if you meet steel, retreat, if you meet mush, keep going. And so I think he is putting us and NATO to the test, and we should work on the assumption that this will continue until and unless we respond. I think the discussion, PM, if I may suggest, should take place in that context.
If he faces mush, he continues. If he faces steel, he stops. It's a great assessment of what's going on right now.
Okay, good.
In Russia, the reporting of the attack on the naval base has a very different spin. We asked an expert on Russian state communications, Valery Akimenko, to help us craft an imagined state media bulletin.
На побережье вблизи военно-морской базы Североморска a British frogman's outfit has been discovered on a beach near the Severomorsk naval base. The head of the investigation into last Wednesday's attack says this is powerful evidence of British involvement in the terrorist atrocity. Several experts have likened the suspected British operation to the Nazi surprise attack on the Soviet Union in 1941. It is just the latest example of British-sponsored terrorism. As you know, the UK has been the closest backer of the Nazi regime in Ukraine.
Wow.
I'm Keir Giles. I study and explain Russia for a living. I've written a number of books about what Russia does, why it does it, and what it's going to do next. I'm playing the president of Russia in this war game.
The Kremlin, for the purpose of the game, is in another room, separated from the British side by a corridor, a hall, and a couple of doors. Keir is joined by 3 other experts, each with experience of playing the Russia side in war games to help Western allies better understand the threat posed by Moscow.
There's Toms Rostoks from Latvia, who is going to be playing the Chief of the General Staff, so in charge of the Russian military.
In real life, Toms is a director of the National Defence Academy of Latvia. He's flown to London especially for the war game.
It's October in the game. This may go down in history as the British missile crisis.
It also luckily coincides with the birthday of our beloved leader and president.
Also just off a flight is Maria Engqvist, deputy head of the Russia and Eurasia Studies programme at the Swedish Defence Research Agency.
She's going to be playing the head of military intelligence.
Yeah, 7th of October, if I do not remember incorrectly.
Known as the GRU, this is the agency that the UK believes carried out the Salisbury spy poisonings and many other hostile acts.
And then dialing in remotely, we have Robin Högblom. He is a naval analyst from Finland, and he will be playing the commander of Russia's Northern Fleet.
The Navy is very eager to take this opportunity to be able to extract revenge for the terrorist attack at Severomorsk.
Wow, no expense
Appearing
spared.
via video link, his backdrop shows the inside of a warship.
He's got a good backdrop.
Robin looks very operational.
In reality, he's in his office in Finland. Robin is a senior advisor at a risk assessment company called Risk Intelligence. And despite what he said about extracting revenge, no one on the Russian team really believes the UK had anything to do with the explosions at their naval base.
It is our assessment that it was the terrorist attack carried out by Dagestani extremists.
The Chief of the General Staff has just been asked who was responsible. He too blames Dagestani militants, echoing the British assessment.
Very good. Thank you, colleagues. I approve of your assessment. We will deal with our Dagestani terrorists at another time, but this provides a historic opportunity to neutralize the Anglo-Saxons as an obstacle to our objectives. I agree with your recommendation that we should use the Severomorsk attack as a pretext for launching Operation Tuman.
This is the secret code name the Russian side has given its attack plan. The word means fog in Russian. The president asks his spy chief whether she thinks the US will help the UK.
It is the assessment of my agency that the US have no interest in engaging in warfighting in Europe. Britain and the US have drifted apart increasingly during the past years. US resources remain focused in the Indo-Pacific. This is a bold and necessary operation that will effectively be the end of NATO.
Wow. Again, third marker of what we're seeing with Trump kind of pulling away from NATO and that giving green lights to people. This is very well thought out.
The commander of the Northern Fleet gives an update on the readiness of his flotilla.
As we have been able to prepare for these strikes for 2 months, we are in a relatively good shape, though of course we have not been able to create any miracles or add new units to the fleet in this time.
So to confirm, Admiral, we are not expecting that the United Kingdom is able to defend realistically against our missiles. Is that correct?
That is correct. The number of air defenses they have available able to intercept our missiles is very limited. We have a significant number of missiles aboard our ships and submarines. This should not be an issue.
He's identified a glaring vulnerability here that, as with most of Britain's military cuts, can be traced back to the end of the Cold War, when successive governments ran down their ability to defeat attacks from the sky, to save cash. Today, only a handful of RAF squadrons and a limited number of army systems can intercept cruise missiles. These are self-guided weapons propelled by a jet engine that are powered all the way onto a target. As for ballistic missiles, which are blasted to a high altitude, even out of the Earth's atmosphere, before dropping at a steep angle onto a target at great speed, the Royal Navy's Type 45 destroyers are the UK's sole line of defence. But it only has 6 of these billion-pound warships, and 4 are routinely unavailable because of maintenance woes and crew shortages.
Shocking.
One of them, HMS Daring, has spent more years being fixed than out at sea. A NATO command base in Germany is responsible for defending the airspace of the whole alliance, including the UK. However, British forces would be the first line of defence against any threats coming straight at them from the Atlantic.
Chief of General Staff, I would like to hear from you about our overall military position.
The president is now asking his defence chief about the overall state of Russia's armed forces given their war in Ukraine.
Of course, much attention has been paid in past years on the special military operation and the losses that we have suffered during that operation. And those losses have been significant. However, in terms of military personnel, we have recovered, and our military in the coming years will be even larger than it was before the start of the special military operation.
So for a target like the United Kingdom, we are in as strong a position as we were before.
Yes, and we are certainly in a stronger position than the UK.
As they take more of the Ukraine and liberate them, they get more recruits. This is how World War II, as Germany took Czechoslovakia, they used troops that they gained and equipment that they gained to then push on through to Poland as well.
Thank you for your assessment.
Back in London, Amber Rudd, playing the Home Secretary, has an update for the COBRA meeting.
I'm so sorry. I've got some urgent news, Prime Minister, so I feel it ought to be on the table. That we've heard from MI5 that Russian families are leaving the UK, and that includes diplomatic staff. I would suggest that our immediate inquiry, I would turn at this stage to find out from JIC whether we have any further intelligence from MI6, perhaps, who might know more about some intentions. But the fact that Russian staff are leaving at speed is...
Do we have any reports of the activity of the
concerning.
Russian intelligence officers in the embassy? As in, do we see any activity of Russians, GRU or whatever, in the UK? Has that changed?
I think I'd ask JIC Chair about that, if I may.
We'll put on that under immediate investigation, Prime Minister, Home Secretary.
The exodus of a number of Russian families is a further indicator that something bad is heading the UK's way.
Prime Minister, can I ask, as the CDS said in his earlier remarks, this is an escalation of the squeeze we've felt from the Russians in terms of their attacks on the UK and on other European countries as well. Do you have any view, Prime Minister, or perhaps the Foreign Secretary will, about what the Russians are after? What are they trying to achieve? Is it anything in particular, or is it just retaliation for an event that took place that we weren't, in fact, responsible for, but they want to show a response to?
Well, one of the challenges is Russia has a long track record of false flag for the purpose of its own agenda.
A false flag can mean an action, like a bombing or an assassination, that's done by one side but blamed on the other to create a fake pretext to attack them. Attribution is also typically hard, making it difficult for the accused to prove their innocence. In this case, the Russian government did not deliberately target its own naval base, but it knows who did. Yet the Kremlin is using the atrocity as a way to falsely smear the British and excuse whatever activity it plans to do next.
We saw that in the build-up to the Ukraine war, which was exposed by the West on a number of occasions. And so there is almost nothing ever off limit with the Russians in how they currently function.
He should know. When Ben Wallace was the UK's real Defence Secretary, he was a leading voice in 2021, raising the alarm about the impending threat of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. He was also instrumental in rushing out British weapons to Ukrainian forces to help them fend off the initial onslaught the following year.
So it could be they genuinely believe we are behind this attack. My own experience when the Russians were obsessed that there was a dirty bomb in Ukraine, I had a phone call with my Russian defense counterpart. He contacted me, my Turkish counterpart, and my French counterpart. Interesting choice.
Sure, we can critique other people for going to war because of weapons of mass destruction that could or could not be there. The United States and ourselves might not have a great track record to accuse other people of that.
Choice of people for him to contact. When we were in one summer, they were determined that the British and others were behind a dirty bomb, totally untrue and false. And to this day, I would still be guessing whether they believed it or whether they made it up themselves. So I think we can only really look at their physical deployment as the marker, and trying to undo the riddle could be a lot of energy, the riddle behind it all.
Helena Kennedy, as the Attorney General, offers her view.
It could be testing whether the NATO alliance is actually as solid as it once was.
Right.
And we know that fragility is one of the issues that concerns us. And they may be actually putting that to the test.
Always punching the bruise.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Suddenly, the chair of the Joint Intelligence Committee interrupts.
So we've just had 2 injects, one from Defence Intelligence, which is also replicated from the information coming from SIS.
SIS is another acronym for MI6. It means Secret Intelligence Service. Rob reveals that more submarines have joined the Russian flotilla in the North Atlantic.
And we estimate the total now out of Severomorsk is 7 SSBNs, which is the entire Northern Fleet bar 1, 8 SSNs.
Just for clarity, SSBN is the bombers and SSN are the hunter-killer submarines.
That's correct.
That's 15 submarines in the North Atlantic.
Well, and PM clustered. I mean, that's the very striking thing. I don't know whether CDS you got a view if you were sitting.
A screen in the COBRA room lights up with a map that shows the Russian deployment also includes 2 large destroyers and 4 frigates. These are medium-sized ships armed with missiles. Such a formidable display of naval power is the biggest warning sign yet from Moscow.
This is well above the normal complement that we would expect to see deployed. They've all assembled at a rendezvous point, but you can see from our map that they are moving in a southwesterly direction. And there are active Russian air operations over the North Atlantic, all of which are being tracked by our own surveillance sites and by our own surveillance aircraft and by American satellites.
Put in perspective for others around the table, normally, roughly, you'd get 3 to 5 submarines lurking around the Atlantic, Russian, American, French, British. To have 15 from just one power alone is extraordinary and takes a huge amount of effort actually by any country to see that many submarines. So it is definitely out of the ordinary.
I don't know whether CDS you got a view if you were sitting in your Russian counterpart's chair, what would the basis would be for deploying not only that number but in that concentration?
So in my view, this is clearly an enormous show of force. It's quite out of any form of normal pattern. All of this activity is in international waters and airspace. So
the problem is we're going to think it's saber rattling all the way up until there's birds in the actual air. We're going to think it's a show of force, it's saber rattling, it's scare tactics, etc. I am curious to know if the Russian side of this war game say what they're actually going to target, infrastructure, military, etc.
It's still at some distance, but also protected by international law. It is heading around the UK, but it remains in range of the UK. The best outcome is that this is just a show of force. The worst outcome is this is setting a force in order to attack the UK.
The National Security Advisor explains this is not just a problem for the UK, it's a challenge to the whole of the NATO alliance. All 32 member states share responsibility for defending their land, seas and skies.
There are NATO protocols for this, and we're obviously anxious in the current circumstances that those protocols might not apply. But if we can just at least test by presuming that they will, do it perhaps on the professional military channel first, CDS perhaps, and just almost presume that they're going to operate as we've always understood they will. And then if it looks as though they won't, we then escalate to the political level.
He's referring here to uncertainty about the United States' commitment to defending Europe. Jack Straw, speaking as the Foreign Secretary, is far more blunt.
Prime Minister, the elephant in the room here is what the US is going to do. In the past, we were confident that the US would be with us. Now, the question I raise is, as well as quotes hitting the phone to professional opposite numbers in NATO headquarters and command centres, do we also hit the phones, in my case, to talk to the American Secretary of State? Because if we are able to get a situation where the US understands that this is a threat against them as well as against us, then we're in a very, very different position to be able to deter Russia from a situation where the Russians can take great comfort from the fact that the United States is simply going to...
He'll say, no, you've spent next to nothing on your military out of your GDP for the last God knows how many years. Why should we now come and save you? The chances are they're going to sit back and go, we're not getting involved.
Sit on its hands, because
Until recently, it would have been implausible even to contemplate the possibility of the United States not immediately mobilising to help defend the UK in the face of such a show of force by Russia. Not so much anymore. Washington has repeatedly warned its NATO allies to stop relying so heavily on American protection and do more to defend themselves. At the same time, the White House has been seeking to forge better relations with Moscow, to the dismay of London and most other Western capitals. It's an upending of a security landscape that's been in place since the end of the Second World War.
I think the Foreign Secretary is absolutely right. To start point really is with the United States here, and secondly then NATO, the two bodies we have taken partly for granted, but we have definitely taken as our guarantor for 70 odd years. I think in this situation we should absolutely take that for starter.
The British side also needs to prepare its own military and society for the possibility of the home front being turned into a war zone.
And society. What I've said they should be doing for how long? Since I've started the channel. Where's our civil defence? Well, you know, where's our preparedness leaflets coming through the door?
Something no Prime Minister has seriously considered or planned for since the 1980s.
I was
Shocking.
just going to suggest, Pam, because those of us who need to put it into effect need to get out of this room and get those actions
Could we do
going.
the readiness for assurance? Readiness in itself is a deterrence to people. So if I could start, first of all, with CDS and Defence Secretary on that. What is our ability to either change our readiness? What ideas do you have to increase our readiness, both at sea, land and air?
PM, as CDS said earlier on, he's already advising that forces be concentrated and early steps are taken to mobilise and outload supplies. CDS, do you want to expand on that?
So I suggest that we apply the P-8 reconnaissance aircraft that we have, the currently one only, but shortly two Type 23 anti-submarine frigates that we can put to sea. And the best effort of that...
The Chief of the Defence Staff, CDS, also says 1, if possible 2, Royal Navy attack submarines are being deployed to help monitor the Russian flotilla. He also has plans for one of the UK's 2 aircraft carriers.
I recommend that although it's not at the highest state of readiness, that we put the Prince of Wales carrier to sea. I believe I can get 8 F-35s on board it. And we send it into the North Atlantic between the Russian group and the UK. It will take some days to get there.
This October, in the real world, the Navy's £3 billion carrier will actually be on the other side of the globe. The warship left Portsmouth back in April on an 8-month deployment to the Indo-Pacific. It's accompanied by a Type 45 destroyer and up to 24 of the UK's F-35 jets, leaving Britain even less well defended. In the Wargame, though, we've imagined that the trip was cancelled amid escalating tensions with Russia, so
well, that would be good foresight to have done that, but
the ships and aircraft are available to fight.
So this is best case scenario, not real world scenario, or what it could be, where they're not here at all. And we know what kind of state of disrepair a lot of our stuff is in. So, yeah, it's scary. Nobody's mentioned telling the public yet, or what are they going to say to the press, or how are they going to spin this. That's going to be interesting.
The Prime Minister has a recommendation as well.
Could you also look at readying the second Trident SSBN?
He's referring to the UK's nuclear-armed submarines.
Obviously, we always have one at sea on patrol, and while we know one's in refit and there are 3 others, I would be grateful if we look at the readiness of that.
It's the most dramatic move yet by the British side, underlining the gravity of the crisis. The Navy has a fleet of 4 nuclear-armed submarines. One is always deployed on a rotating basis, providing what's known as the continuous at-sea deterrence. That means it's ready to fire nuclear weapons to defend the UK if given the order. Preparing to put a second submarine out.
We'll ignore the fact that the last few Trident test firings have failed.
From its base at Faslane in Scotland would send a clear signal to Moscow to back off.
And let's not forget that that boat is perfectly possible to operate alongside, even if it's not at sea.
He means the submarine can still fire nuclear weapons from its moorings if necessary.
So from the Russian point of view, it'll be viewed as a threat.
As for the UK homeland, the Defence Chief is doing the best he can in coordination with NATO to defend as much as possible.
What I recommend is that we surge the Royal Air Force to produce 2 24-hour combat air patrols. One vital piece of guidance I need from you: I can protect 2 areas of the UK on a 24-hour basis. I need to prioritise.
He says one has to be the Faslane submarine base.
You've asked me about the second Trident boat. I need to put one of those combat air patrols over Faslane, or the nuclear architecture will be very vulnerable. And the second one I propose to put over and around London. That's it.
It's a pretty devastating admission. The military chief is saying his air force only has the capacity to defend 2 sites in total across the whole of the UK.
So, the rest of us, guess what? We're on our own. Shocker. Nobody's coming to save you.
The Prime Minister isn't so sure London should be one of them.
So in terms of military vulnerability, is London the priority if this was an attack by Russia? That, you know, randomly hitting suburbs of London is not going to deteriorate our capabilities, as opposed to putting those patrols somewhere like, I don't know, over the RAF bases of East Anglia.
So, Professor, that depends how you feel about Whitehall and the centre of government and everything else that sits in and around the centre of London.
Yes to Faslane. The second deployment for now, not London, but over the key military infrastructures that you consider.
Do we think that the current Prime Minister would take that, or would he be more interested in protecting, like he said, Whitehall and things like that? Interesting to know your comments on that one.
James Heapy, our Defence Secretary, then speaks.
It's also worth noting that the activity that CDS describes is a not insignificant outload of UK military resource. And I think that brings with it 2 issues. Firstly, that we will not be able to deploy that amount of force in secret. Indeed, you may not want to deploy it in secret, but we need to think carefully about what the messaging is that we attach to the outload of those forces. But secondly, it won't escape the notice of many in the commentariat that what we do deploy is still overmatched by what the Russians have deployed as well.
As they talk, another update comes in.
Forgive me, I have one piece of news, which is I understand that an Akula-class Russian submarine has surfaced off Orkney, and it's then paralleled a commercial ferry and then submerged.
Imagine this. You're on a ferry to the Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland, along with dozens of other passengers. You look out the window and see a giant grey attack submarine pop up out the water and then dive again. People would surely pull out their phones to take videos and photographs to share online.
That is exceptional activity, it's clearly threatening, and it's messaging to us. It's also public, so we'll not be able to keep that a secret in a way that a Russian deployment in the North Atlantic might be a secret.
I mean, this is clearly breaking out nationally, CDS. They've seen it, but also the fact that the Russian diplomats and their families are leaving is now all over Twitter.
The Home Secretary.
So it's going to be very evident that the Russians are signalling that there may be, let's call it what it is, Prime Minister, there may be an attack.
What are you going to tell us?
I think we just have to be cautious of the word attack at the moment. We have to prepare ourselves. We have to be determined and focused. Clear messaging of denial. Most important fish to catch at this phase is a strong US commitment and NATO commitment to this. At the same time, a lot of work in the Civil Contingency Secretariat to make sure we prepare our domestic defences, MI5, police leave, consider whether we cancel police leave, etc., to make sure we can maximise our readiness.
If I may, PM, I agree with all that. I just think we need to just think how we're going to message to the public as this escalates. Absolutely. And I would really like to have, I don't know whether you're going to be doing media or the press secretary is going to be doing the media, but just some reassuring words, but also acknowledging the threat that we're under. Absolutely. Because that will be available for
So, Home Secretary, as the guardian of the domestic threat, I would ask you after this meeting to do the media reassurance around civilian infrastructure, civilians, a reassurance about investigation of the F-35 pilots.
The Prime Minister also tasks his Defence Secretary with releasing comments about what the armed forces will be doing.
A rather crisp and factual current defence statement about we have deployed, we've seen unprecedented sort of keywords, unprecedented deployment, working with allies. So reassurance from defence, we have a plan from the Home Office, which I always think important to communicate. You have a plan.
Yes.
That's the most important thing.
Communicate you have a plan. Even if we don't have a plan, let's communicate that we have a plan. Let's reassure everyone. Let's not tell them there's only 2 places we can defend in the UK. Keep them in the dark as long as possible, because we don't want them all going panic buying at Tesco.
I think you have to go, if I may. I think we all have our homework to do. Foreign Secretary and I will start working the phones. We'll get you engaged as we need to.
Thank you very much indeed. Break. Thank you.
As Rob Johnson ends the session in the COBRA room, though, the Defence Chief steps out and walks across the corridor to a second room. Inside, the top operational commander has gathered a team of advisors to discuss the UK's limited options to defend itself.
Yeah, this should be fun.
CGO, hello.
Morning, CDS.
Lieutenant General Sir David Capewell is a highly regarded and hugely experienced Royal Marines officer who spent almost 4 decades serving in the armed forces. He's reprising his former job as Chief of Joint Operations, or CJO. In an emergency like this, he'd be in overall command of UK forces in the fight.
I've just come from COBRA. It would be fair to say there's quite a lot of disquiet of what's going on, considerable uncertainty, but I have some instructions which we are going to have to tackle at speed.
The Defence Chief lists the tasks, from defending the UK airspace to tracking the Russian flotilla, despite far too few jets, ships and missiles.
Everybody knows we can't do it all.
He also says there's a big question mark over whether NATO is going to help.
Thank you, CDS. We can definitely get on with the planning necessary to provide the protection and oversight and surveillance requirements that you've described. But right at the back of my mind is that we are beginning to see the mortgaging of risk from political intent to operational reality And the operational reality is that we are extremely thin on the ground and will require quite a lot of negotiation with NATO, who will also be feeling the same pressure to do something nationally as opposed to collectively.
So in the spirit of the COBRA meeting, it was not the time for us to have a protracted discussion about how we're dealing with a major Russian military threat, with armed forces that have been conditioned by 30 years of traveling through the post-Cold War era. And we are where we are with what we have. And as you described, unless NATO stands up and supports us now, we're going to feel pretty chilly pretty soon.
This is the risk, right? If this threat is to the UK, do the other NATO countries need to consolidate their own forces and think about their own defence? And NATO, in theory, is a great idea, but it's never been tested to that degree. Who will stand up? Will anyone?
He then puts the crisis in even starker terms.
We want to be in a place where we're contributing to public reassurance, not public panic, and we're moving at speed. To put it in another way, I can't tell you whether in 24 hours from now we are going to be at war with Russia, but you and I know that we don't have a plan for this. We're massively under-resourced if we stand alone without NATO, and we haven't any time to fix this, but we're going to have to manage it.
CDS, I'd like you to take one message back to the Cabinet, please. If they think...
One message. We're fucked.
...that we might have to start a fight, or certainly defend against a fight, what I want to be sure of is that they have a view about how we finish this fight.
So, that's the end of episode 1. We'll do episode 2 as well. I'm sure I'll get your feedback below. If this is a waste of time, then fine, no problem. Just let me know. Yeah, but it was very interesting. It was very interesting. Scarily accurate on the initial lead up. And it's good to see that some people, even if it's not directly the ministers and stuff, but like the military chiefs, know the score. They know that we're thin on the ground, as their words say. So that reality doesn't seem to have sunk in to politicians, both in this war game and in reality. So very interesting, very well done. Great production on Sky News, so I'll be listening to more. Let me know if you want me to keep reacting to them and listening together, and we'll do some more. Other than that, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, all that wonderful stuff, and I'll see you all in another one soon. Goodbye.